So I am chatting here today with Brooke Hawkins. Do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yep. I'm Brooke Hawkins. I'm a voice designer at My Planet, a company based in Toronto, Canada. And I've been a conversational designer for a long time, designing voice and chat experiences for healthcare organizations, large companies, uh, nonprofits, e-commerce sites, and increasingly also I am involved in different ethics initiatives in the industry. You can find me tweeting about that stuff on social media. I'm always retweeting and kind of sharing topics about ethics in voice.
That's amazing. There's so many follow-up questions I have just based on that. So firstly, I didn't know that My Planet was based in Canada. Does that mean that you're fully remote, even like outside of COVID?
Yeah, yeah. Typically, I would go into the office about once a month and visit people, but yeah, now the borders are closed and we're in a
Hmm.
post-COVID world.
Yeah,
So I was already sort of remote, so this isn't
yeah,
too different. But yeah, full remote world.
yeah. So what is it like working remotely as a conversation designer? Because I know I'm a conversation designer. I go into the office every day in a not COVID world. And I still have difficulties, like explaining different flows and how like the process is going to go. So I imagine that's like tenfold when you're remote.
Yeah, I will say I got a lot of great experience dealing with this when I worked for Nuance. I was on a team where everyone was remote, and something a positive thing about living in this world where we're all remote is that uh, being remote, uh, you kind of have to imagine that everyone that you're working with is remote for it to be effective. So even simple things like remembering to turn on the video chat when you have a remote member joining in when everyone else is in person um, creates this kind of, as you mentioned, like conversational hangups, and it's difficult to explain things when everyone else is in person. But now that we're all remote, I think more people have adjusted to this like always digital type of conversation. So in that way, things have gotten a little easier. And when I worked for Nuance, it was the default because we were all remote. But yeah, it's definitely a lot of video chats. Multimodal
Yeah.
stuff. Sending maybe a question via chat or text or email, and letting people simmer on it and think about what you're asking, and then maybe doing a follow up video call.
Mhm.
So it's kind of nice. You can kind of communicate in these different channels, but yeah, it's more effective when everyone's remote instead of
Yeah.
just one person.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Are there any like tools you use to collaborate or maybe like design remotely that help you?
Yeah, we've been using Miro a lot with
Hmm.
the work that we're doing. A lot of like mind mapping. I've been working increasingly on some different UX, just general projects. So, everything from documenting user research that we're doing and concepts and topics there. It's basically like a digital whiteboard. So,
Yeah.
doing a lot of work with that tool. um, yeah, a lot of video chatting. It all seems so simple, but that really helps to kind of see people and be able to kind of see people's facial expressions when they talk, and having
Yeah.
a camera on really makes a big difference. And then increasingly, we've been looking at tools like voice flow
Yeah.
and different conversational tools that allow you to prototype as a designer right away. So,
Mhm.
um, kind of cutting out some of that time where maybe you would pass designs to a developer and wait and be able to sit in the room and work things out. And now, kind of having more control over prototyping and design. So yeah, interesting world.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I know that I checked out VoiceFlow last week and I was really impressed with just like the design of the tool itself,
Yeah,
which is really great.
totally. Yeah, we just a friend of mine started at the company, and she was
Mhm.
giving me a walkthrough of the new tool. Like, how
Yeah.
cool! So I'm
Mhm.
excited to see how they keep growing too.
Mhm. Me too. How does your typical design process play out?
Our typical design process is really similar to a typical UX design process, I would say. So typically, we're tasked with some kind of problem or research question or
Mhm.
something that we're trying to solve for our customers. And we immediately get into starting to orient ourselves to the problem and doing a lot of research.
Right.
So exploring who the stakeholders are, who our solution is going to affect, what a chat or voice solution might solve in that particular context. And then once we start to have those things defined, then we'll go into design. So creating, actual dialogue flows and back and forth, conversational paths. Um, Maybe not the most complicated one from the
Yeah.
beginning, but maybe these little easy paths to get a framework started. and then going back, doing more testing,
Mhm.
showing real users how we've created the solution. Maybe this solves their problem. Maybe we start to see that the hypotheses we've made don't help them at all,
Right.
which is good in a way. Going back to the drawing board, refining those things,
Mhm.
and then working closely with developers to build out those conversations in tools like Dialogflow or um, in for Alexa,
Yeah.
and creating the actual final experiences. But then again, testing as soon as they launch, seeing how they're performing out in the wild,
Yeah.
and getting a lot of data back immediately about how our experiences are doing.
Awesome. One of the things I struggle with when I'm designing new experiences is really communicating how the experience is going to work to stakeholders,
Mm,
especially stakeholders that are a little bit less technical.
totally.
Do you have any experience with that?
Yeah, definitely. I think a particular problem that I've had as well is sometimes with voice experiences, your deliverables to stakeholders often will look like scripts or Excel files because you're
Hmm.
trying to show it in the clearest possible way. And often clients think, well, this is just a Word file. I should be able to edit it or change this or move this sentence
Right.
around. Yeah, you're intentionally kind of hiding all of that complicated logic so they
Hmm.
don't have to deal with that. But in another way, they don't see all of the technical decisions that you've made and why you've made those affordances or whatever, and that those things shouldn't be edited. Um, so increasingly, I've tried to create documents for stakeholders that um, not only show like the scripts and the the way that something will interact, like a flow chart or a Word document, but try to embed some reasons for that or some support
Hmm.
for what parts of the research have backed up those decisions. And I think often those things in tandem with the script
Yeah.
help your clients say like, okay, I shouldn't edit this. There's some research. This isn't
Mhm.
just a word choice. This is like a
Yeah.
something that was researched and decided upon intentionally.
Absolutely. Okay. So you mentioned a little earlier that you are on a ethics committee. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yes. So last year at Project Voice, I gave a presentation about an ethical group that I started. And it's been a little slow due to COVID, but this is called the Voice Ethics Committee. And the vision there is to kind of create a working group and conversational groups and reading groups all around ethics in the industry. And a positive thing that came out of the conference was getting paired up with the Open Voice Network. And they're doing a lot of work already around creating standards and basically kind of best practices in the industry around ethics.
Hmm.
So, in companion with the work that I had created, I've been working with them. We're getting more and more members, and we're always looking for people. So,
Yeah.
I'll make sure the link is shared after this video to go along with that. But we're creating standards around key topic areas around ethics, basically to publish to the industry, so that companies, as they're developing new products, or designers, as they're developing new tools, can kind of look to peer-reviewed
Yeah.
documents from experts in the industry that say, here's a good way to approach consent, or here's a good way to
Right.
approach gender in voice, or here's a good way to approach security and privacy in voice. So very at the beginning of all of this work,
Yeah.
but I think it'll be cool as it starts to come together.
Yeah. And that's super important to just have like a set of standards that, anyone who's getting into this field can kind of refer back to instead of, everyone doing like their own research and not really, collaborating or talking about it.
Totally, yeah. I'm trying to, as much as possible, find ways for everyone to mind meld. There's such good stuff out there, and it's
Yeah.
all disparate. And we're a new industry, which makes sense. And yeah, I think we're getting to the point where I've personally given talks at conferences where we're asking these ethical questions and we're raising these ethical scenarios. But I think what 2020 has taught us is that these situations aren't theoretical.
Hmm.
They're real. So,
Yeah.
trying to get more to doing the work and being very precise with our language and less about waxing poetic about ethics.
Of course. Yeah, that makes total sense. So you did say in that response that we are a new field, and that's something that I really want to talk about. I was in the voice field before I even knew I was in the voice field. Back in 2017, I was making Alexa skills at
Yeah,
General Electric, and I didn't even know the voice field existed. I just thought it encompassed like a larger like software engineering field.
totally.
Fast forward to today. I'm a conversational designer, and I now obviously know about the voice and the conversation design community and all the resources. But I think you've been in the field a little bit longer, so I'm interested to know, because you've seen it, evolve into this like bigger and bigger thing. Um, do you feel like it's still growing, or it's kind of hit a point where it's as big as it's gonna get?
I definitely think it's still growing. Yeah, similar to you, I started in the IVR world, so designing phone
Mhm.
calls with a virtual assistant. And I didn't really know that word at the time, but we
Yeah.
were using a voice actor and creating this digital personality.
Mhm.
And then, yeah, Google and Alexa launched their home personal assistants. And I was like, oh, this is really such a bigger thing. And I started to read books by people like Kathy Pearl and
Mhm.
James Giagnola at Google, and realized that people have been designing IVR calls and thinking about voice for a long time.
Yeah.
So it's cool to be rooted in that history of like, oh, this is all just an evolution.
Mhm.
Alexa and Google didn't invent this new thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, to your second part of that question, I definitely think there's so much more that this industry is going to do and is on the cusp of doing.
Mhm.
I definitely have a specific eye on things like voice in the car, especially with cars like Teslas or increasingly automobiles with like touchless
Mhm.
or more like screen-based interfaces.
Right.
How voice could augment that, and then definitely with voice in retail, I think that's something that Amazon and Google are both been trying to crack the code on for a long time. Um, and yeah, voice is an excellent thing to be in someone's home, and you're using it with your routines throughout your
Yeah.
day. it it's so ready to know uh, your needs throughout the day. Like if you're making coffee and you run out, your voice
Yeah.
assistant's right there. It should be able to fulfill that request.
Yeah.
So yeah, thinking about automation and voice, there's so much more that's coming and people are thinking about. And yeah, I think people's literacy as well with voice is getting increasing.
Yeah. I would
uh,
agree with that.
More people have voice in the home.
Mhm.
It used to be something I said I did, and my family would go, "Oh, cool." But now people are like, "Oh, okay, voice
Yeah.
assistants. I know what those are."
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah, you know that, it's super popular when you can explain what you do to your grandma and she understands.
yes,
That's always my test. I think I'm a little bit, like, away from that, but I think
so
I'm getting there. It's
yes,
gonna
for
happen
sure.
soon.
Yeah, I agree. That's about where I am too.
So what advice would you have, for people looking to break into the voice industry?
Yeah, definitely. So I studied in a humanities program at Michigan State University. So my background is in professional writing, specifically technical writing. But I also took a lot of courses in philosophy and psychology, and the social sciences. And I think all that stuff really helped. At the time, I expected to go into a career of UX research or UX
Yeah,
design. And all of that stuff has been incredibly relevant for that. And it's equally relevant for voice. So you're doing a lot of the same stuff, like researching people and understanding how people work, understanding what their problems are, and how you can create a tool to solve those problems.
mhm,
Um, and also, my humanities background, I think, and for students in a similar situation, has really helped with the ethics work too. Just thinking about the broader societal and cultural impacts of the technology that we're making is, I think, really important,
yeah,
and I want more people entering the field to think it's important. So, yeah, take those classes. I would say humanities are equally as
I
important
agree.
as technical classes.
Yes, I agree
Uh,
with that. Yeah, one of
uh,
the
yeah,
biggest things that I try to stress to people is you don't need to have a technical background. Um,
yeah,
you don't need to have any like machine learning experience or data science experience. I actually prefer when people do not,
totally.
because I like the way they think. I think it kind of like pushes us to
Hmm.
move forward in the field.
I think that's true.
So my next question would be around what is the hardest part of your job currently?
I think the hardest part of my job is mm, you know, working in making sure I'm communicating effectively to all the different groups that I need to communicate with. Um, and that sounds big and nebulous, but it's something that's always in my mind. And I think you kind of got at this question a little earlier. But the documentation that you send to the client is going to
Right.
look a lot different than the documentation you send to a developer,
Hmm.
which is going to look a lot different than the documentation you might put on your website to
Yeah.
market the product. And so just being mindful of those different audiences all the time, and making sure throughout all of the steps in the design process that you're asking. Who's the audience for what I'm working on for this particular deliverable for this wider project, and what is
Yeah.
it solving for people? Um, and yeah, it seems so basic, but really communication, making sure you're checking in with people, particularly developers, making
Mhm.
sure that ambiguity, you know, ambiguity is always going to be there, but how can you reduce it? How can you improve documentation to solve those problems? Um, yeah, communication.
Awesome. That's a good one. And then my last question for you today is going to be, what's your favorite voice experience and why?
Ooh, yeah. I think I really like Rue, Planned Parenthood's
Yes.
app. I think that's just so cool and interesting. But yeah, to take a topic that's like typically like taboo or stressful, or
Yeah.
what's the actual word I'm looking for?
I think
Like a
taboo is like a good one.
yeah, it's a hard topic, and particularly for teens that may be nervous about asking those questions.
Yeah.
Early in my voice career, when we were designing um, phone calls for
Mhm.
healthcare, that's something we saw a
Yeah.
lot, was that people felt more comfortable talking to an automated system about these
Mhm.
sticky topics and that were
Right.
maybe sometimes embarrassing or uncomfortable, um, because they don't feel judged. And
Yeah.
I think there are a lot of cool researchers working on this stuff at MIT Media Lab around like social robots and
Yeah.
healthcare and for children. And yeah, I think Rue just
Yes.
encapsulates a lot of that stuff.
I'm so glad you mentioned Rue because I love Rue, and I was reading up about it a few weeks ago and just about the demographic
Yeah,
of children who use it and how
yeah,
it's pretty 50-50 with in terms of like gender, in terms
that's
of
cool.
like age demographics. Like I thought
That's
it's amazing.
cool.
And I love if you guys haven't checked out Rue, check out Rue. The confetti that pops up when you give the product feedback. I've actually given the product feedback 2 or 3 times just to see the confetti pop up.
I
It
love that.
makes my day.
That's awesome. That's
Yeah.
good design, yeah, to get someone to do something that they usually don't do. I love it.
Yeah. So, Brooke, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm
And
excited to view this one and all the rest of the videos.
yeah, we're really excited too. And I'm going to make sure to link in the description below the ethics
Yep,
committee
yep.
ethics.
That's
Okay,
right, yeah, I'll send links
yes,
for the Voice Ethics Committee and the Open Voice Network working group, so
awesome.
everyone can be a part of
So
that too.
yeah, so anyone who wants to join those can join those, which is super cool. I'm definitely going to check them out.
Cool, thank you.